Danielle lay motionless in her hospital bed, the rhythmic beeping of machines the only reassurance that her unborn child was safe. Across the room stood her husband, the powerful millionaire, Thomas Sterling, whose smooth voice had promised to stand by her forever. Yet, in the hush of night, Danielle's eyelids fluttered just enough to see Thomas murmuring on the phone. Unaware she was listening, he spoke of betrayal, lies, and a hidden agenda that would shatter everything she believed in. Little did he know that Danielle heard every word, and she would soon devise a plan to unmask his dissay. It in a way he would never forget. Danielle Thompson had always believed in the fairy tale version of love. Growing up in the scenic countryside outside Charleston, South Carolina, she had spent her childhood wandering sunflower fields and dreaming of finding a knight in shining armor. Her parents, Mark and Evelyn Thompson, owned a small but well-respected bakery and instilled in Danielle the values of hard work, honesty, and loyalty. She carried those lessons in her heart through every turn of life. At age 25, she moved to New York City with high hopes and modest savings. She had no illusions that the world was easy, but she did believe that staying true to one's moral compass could guide anyone through dark times. And for a while, this seemed to be the case. She landed a job at an art gallery, her sweet voice and discerning eye catching the attention of artists from around the world. The gallery's clientele included the city's wealthiest inhabitants, some of the most influential movers and shakers of Manhattan. And that was where she first encountered Thomas Sterling. Thomas Sterling was known as the real estate tycoon with the golden touch. By the age of 32, he owned multiple skyscrapers, luxury condominiums, and had stakes in international ventures from Dubai to Tokyo. Whispers of his success spread through art auctions and high society cocktail parties. Those who didn't admire him envied him. Those who didn't envy him feared him. When he strolled into Danielle's gallery one crisp October evening, she couldn't help but notice how the room seemed to shrink around him. His imposing figure, sharpened by a tailored suit, commanded attention without him even trying. He carried himself with the casual grace of a king inspecting his kingdom. Naturally, rumors flitted about. He had dated top actresses, traveled with private security, and gambled obscene amounts at underground poker tables, always coming out a winner. Yet, as he approached Danielle that night, he wore the confident smile of a man who knew exactly what he wanted, and what he wanted was her. Their first conversation brimmed with chemistry. She expected him to be dismissive or superficial, but his voice was soft, warm, as though he was discovering a piece of art that only he had the ability to appreciate. By the end of the evening, he casually asked for her phone number. Despite the swirl of cautionary tales about men like Thomas, Danielle couldn't resist the magnetic pull of his attention. His compliments felt sincere, his manner disarming. In the months that followed, their romance sped along like a bullet train. Lavish dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, weekend getaways in the Hamptons, and front-row seats at charity galas, Thomas transformed Danielle's modest city life into something resembling a modern-day Cinderella story. She found herself starry-eyed, enamored not just by the opulence, but by the seemingly gentle heart behind Thomas's steely exterior. Yet even in that glow, small flickers of concern nagged at Danielle. She overheard hushed phone calls where Thomas's tone shifted to an unsettling coldness. He never explicitly told her about his business dealings or the true nature of his complicated finances. Occasionally, the mention of a woman named Julia Parker came up, a name that he quickly dismissed as an old friend. Still, Danielle, both confident and trusting, brushed aside those concerns. After all, love was about trust, wasn't it? It wasn't long before Thomas proposed, slipping a diamond ring onto Danielle's finger that practically screamed for paparazzi attention. Everyone who knew Danielle called it a real-life fairy tale, and in that moment, she believed it was. Long before Manhattan's dazzling lights and her introduction to Thomas Sterling, Danielle had lived a life grounded in humble aspirations. At 17, she dreamed of becoming a painter, someone whose work could move hearts and inspire the human soul. She would stay up late in her bedroom, sketching her future on canvases that absorbed her hopes and fears. After moving to the city, she tried to attend the Pratt Institute for a formal education in fine arts, but the tuition fees were beyond her reach. Instead, she worked multiple part-time jobs, waiting tables at a small Italian bistro, guiding tourists at a local museum, and eventually landing at the art gallery that changed her life. Throughout those early years, Danielle also developed a quiet resilience. Life in New York was never simple, and she encountered more than her fair share of rejection and heartbreak. A brief relationship with a fellow artist ended when he abandoned her for a European tour. The rent soared every year, forcing her to live in cramped apartments with paper-thin walls. But she never lost that spark of determination in her eyes. Each disappointment served as a stepping stone. Every closed door reminded her to push harder. It was during this period that she met an older mentor, Dr. Robert Jenkins, a professor at a local community college, who recognized Danielle's knack for storytelling through art. He offered her free auditing opportunities in his classes, explaining that formal education wasn't the only path. Raw passion was often more important. He encouraged her to channel her love of color and form in any setting. The sessions they spent together over coffee and discounted art supplies helped Danielle forge an identity that was true and confident. Despite her struggles, Danielle remained ever the optimist. She volunteered at a women's shelter every other weekend, helping survivors of domestic abuse express themselves through sketching and painting. It was there she learned the true meaning of emotional strength and the complexity of real-world relationships. So when Thomas Sterling waltzed into her life and expressed admiration for her artistic sensibilities, it felt like a vindication of her years of perseverance. Here was a man who not only recognized her talent, but was willing to support her dreams in ways no one else had. He connected her to influential art collectors and introduced her to philanthropic circles that funded community art programs for underprivileged youth. At times, Danielle had to pinch herself to believe that this was really happening. Was she finally living the life she had always fantasized about in those late-night sketching sessions? Yes, there were shadows. She noticed them in the distance, creeping behind Thomas's overly polished stories. But she told herself she was strong enough to handle any truth that emerged. After all, she had faced hardships before. This time she had love on her side, didn't she? Outside the swirl of Manhattan's glitz, Danielle's parents, Mark and Evelyn, offered measured support. They saw how happy she appeared, but couldn't help worrying that it was all happening too fast. Her mother voiced concerns that Danielle dismissed with a gentle laugh. "Mum, trust me, he's amazing. Wait until you meet him." Her father quietly nodded but reserved judgment. It was a significant leap from small-town bakery to high society, and Mark wanted to see how this fairy tale would hold up over time. Their wedding date was set. Without delay, Danielle began planning a modest yet elegant ceremony at a stately church on the Upper East Side. She wore the gown of her dreams, courtesy of a famous designer Thomas befriended during a gala. Friends and family flew in from South Carolina to witness what everyone assumed was the start of a blissful life together. And in the background, Thomas's phone rarely stopped buzzing with business calls and text messages that he insisted were unavoidable. Little did Danielle know that the seeds of deception had already been planted. The wedding took place on a breezy June afternoon, the kind of day that made Danielle believe the universe was smiling down on her. Clusters of lavender roses adorned the pews, while an organist played gentle melodies echoing through the church's high ceilings. Danielle walked down the aisle, her heart pounding as she caught sight of Thomas in a fitted tuxedo. He looked regal, every bit the prince she had allowed herself to hope for. Their vows were exchanged in front of nearly 200 guests, including city dignitaries, socialites, and a sprinkling of close friends from Danielle's quieter world. Everyone who spoke that day talked about the couple's magnetic connection. Thomas's best man, a suave investment banker named Daniel Wu, made a speech lauding Thomas's tenacity and generosity. Danielle's maid of honor, her childhood friend Sarah Greenfield, praised Danielle's big-hearted spirit. The merging of their worlds felt seamless in that radiant moment. After the ceremony, they headed to a grand ballroom reception at the Fitzgerald Hotel overlooking Central Park. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, and the sound of laughter and champagne glasses clinking enveloped the room. Danielle, radiant in her lace bridal gown, couldn't stop smiling. Thomas was by her side, whispering sweet nothings into her ear as guests danced beneath an orchestra's tune. It was, by all appearances, a perfect union. For the first few months, married life glimmered with promise. They moved into Thomas's penthouse on the Upper West Side, a sprawling home of glass walls, stunning city views, and modern art carefully curated to impress. Danielle set up a small art studio in one corner, finally able to indulge in her long-desired passion whenever she wished. Thomas, for his part, opened up about various philanthropic initiatives. He poured money into the city's food banks, financed cultural festivals, and sponsored an emerging artists' fellowship in Danielle's name. Yet as the honeymoon phase tapered, Danielle began to see cracks. Despite being physically present, Thomas was often distant. He'd lock himself in his study, holding private phone calls that ended abruptly when she knocked on the door. More often than not, business trips took him away for days, sometimes weeks, at a stretch. He would return bearing expensive gifts, designer handbags, rare jewelry, plane tickets to exotic locales, but never quite explained why he had to travel so frequently. Even more unnerving, Danielle started noticing a pattern in his excuses. He would say he was flying to Toronto for a deal, but receipts would show a hotel in Miami. Or he'd claim a business meeting in London, only for a housekeeper to mention she'd washed a Hawaiian shirt of his right before he left. Each time Danielle questioned him, Thomas brushed off her concerns with the same confident dismissals. "Darling, these deals are complicated. I have partners worldwide." Sometimes the paperwork says one thing, the real location is another. It's all business. And there was the matter of Julia Parker, a name that popped up far more often than Danielle was comfortable with. Thomas insisted that Julia was merely a colleague, someone involved in property acquisitions. But Danielle recalled the hush that fell over him whenever that name came up, as though he was tiptoeing through a minefield. She tried to push away the suspicions, telling herself that trust was essential in a marriage. Hadn't she promised to stand by him in sickness and in health? Tension simmered beneath the surface. Danielle felt the dissonance more acutely with each passing day. She couldn't pinpoint it exactly, but something about Thomas's life felt staged, as though he was directing a grand performance rather than living an authentic existence. Yet, every time she tried to approach the topic head-on, he skillfully deflected her, leaving her doubting her own instincts. Their social circle didn't offer clarity either. Thomas's millionaire acquaintances spoke in coded business jargon that Danielle struggled to follow. She'd watch them exchange knowing looks or sly grins when the conversation drifted towards certain real estate projects or hush-hush deals. Was it just professional secrecy? Or were they all in on some hidden scheme? Despite these swirling uncertainties, the news that Danielle was pregnant arrived like a burst of sunshine. She discovered it on a chilly December morning, the faint pink lines on the test jolting her heart with equal parts excitement and anxiety. When she told Thomas, he seemed genuinely delighted, lifting her into a joyous embrace. For a moment, Danielle believed that perhaps all those secrets would fade into the background. A baby might bring them together in a way that dispelled the shadows lingering around their marriage. But life rarely follows such a neat narrative. Instead, it weaves complicated threads that can ensnare even the most hopeful hearts. Pregnancy changed everything. Danielle's once boundless energy was channeled into prenatal care and preparing for motherhood. She spent hours poring over baby name books, researching the best strollers, and envisioning a cozy nursery. Initially, Thomas played the role of supportive husband. He accompanied her to a few doctor's appointments, making sure she had the best obstetricians in the city. With his wealth, he could buy her any comfort she needed: ergonomic rocking chairs, top-of-the-line infant cribs, even a designer changing table that arrived in 3 separate shipping crates. Yet, as Danielle's belly grew, so did the distance between them. Thomas's late-night phone calls became more frequent. His apologies for missing dinner morphed from somewhat plausible explanations to vague and half-hearted excuses. He brushed off her concerns about the baby's future with a single phrase: "We have plenty of time, Danielle. Let me handle the financials." It wasn't just the lies themselves, though they were growing alarmingly obvious, but also Thomas's demeanor. He was jittery, prone to sudden mood swings. On good days, he showered her with affection, massaged her feet, and whispered about the beautiful life they would share with their child. On bad days, he'd snap at her unprovoked, vanish for hours, and return with a forced smile that did nothing to hide the tension in his eyes. A chance discovery worsened her suspicions. While tidying up his office one afternoon, Danielle found a crumpled piece of paper with a note scrawled in hurried handwriting: "Meeting at the Grand Regent, Suite 2204, 8 p.m. She recognized the date just 2 days prior, when Thomas had told her he was in Boston on a day trip. The Grand Regent was in the heart of Manhattan, a 10-minute cab ride from their penthouse. That same day, while putting away laundry, she spotted an envelope stashed behind one of Thomas's seldom-used cufflink boxes. It bore the name Julia Parker on the return address, and inside were 2 tickets to a charity gala in Paris, scheduled for the next month. Tickets issued in the name of Thomas Sterling and Julia Parker. The implication was chilling. Fear, anger, and heartbreak pummeled Danielle in waves. She tried confronting Thomas that evening. "Thomas, where were you 2 nights ago? You told me you were in Boston. But I found this note: the Grand Regent, 8 p.m. What's going on?" He froze, then half laughed, as if he found her accusation absurd. "Danielle, you're pregnant. Your hormones are all over the place. You probably misread something. Trust me, I have no idea what that note is about." His eyes narrowed as he added, "And as for Julia Parker, I've told you before, she's a colleague. We work together on complicated transactions. Sometimes we attend events side by side, nothing more." His dismissive tone cut deeper than any explanation could have. Whether it was betrayal or just secrecy, Danielle knew something was fundamentally wrong. The man she married, the one she had thought was her prince, was weaving a web of lies around her. She also knew that confronting him head-on wasn't likely to yield answers. Thomas was too cunning, too adept at misdirection. Though unsure of her next steps, Danielle resolved one thing: she wouldn't be played for a fool. She carried precious life inside her, and she would protect her child no matter what it took. So she decided to stay vigilant, to gather more information. Eventually, the truth would emerge, she was sure of that. And on the night she discovered Thomas's ultimate deception, she realized she was about to face the biggest fight of her life. It happened on a Wednesday night in late spring, around her 6th month of pregnancy. Danielle had been feeling faint spells for several days, and the obstetrician advised her to take it easy. She tried to rest, but persistent headaches and a nagging sense of dread made it impossible. One evening, she nearly collapsed while preparing dinner. Alarmed, Thomas took her to Mount Sinai Hospital. The emergency department was a flurry of activity, crying infants, anxious parents, doctors, bustling from one patient to the next. Danielle was admitted for observation to ensure her baby's heartbeat was stable. A mild complication in her blood pressure readings warranted an overnight stay. As she lay in a private room, her eyes fluttering between consciousness and exhaustion, Thomas hovered by her bedside. For a moment, she felt relief. At least he's here, she thought. At least he cares enough to make sure we're okay. But in the early hours, long after midnight, Danielle awoke to the faint glow of a hospital lamp. Her eyes adjusted to see Thomas perched in a corner, phone pressed to his ear. He spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. Without any outward sign that she was awake, Danielle listened. The conversation changed everything. "We can't push this further, Julia," he hissed. "I'm telling you, the timeline is compromised. Danielle's condition is messing up the schedule." A pause. Yes, I know. But can't you handle things on your end for now? I'll be back in the office soon. Just stop calling me here. She suspects enough as it is." Danielle's heart thumped so loudly she worried he would hear it. Julia Parker. She's not just a colleague, Danielle thought. Her worst suspicions confirmed. The conversation continued, peppered with references to offshore accounts, shadowy deals, and someone named Victor. Danielle's mind raced. She couldn't catch every word, but she gathered enough to know Thomas was neck-deep in something illicit, and Julia was his willing accomplice. When Thomas turned off the phone, he approached the bed. Danielle fought to regulate her breathing, pretending to be asleep. She felt his hand hover over her forehead, as if checking her temperature. Then he slipped out of the room. She heard the door click quietly behind him. Shaken, Danielle turned onto her side, eyes wide open. Her entire world was crumbling. This wasn't just about infidelity or secret business dealings. It was about a massive, orchestrated deception. She realized she didn't actually know what kind of man Thomas was. He could be an international criminal or someone laundering money through elaborate property deals. Worse, if these deals were going under, what would he do next? Danielle was carrying his child. Did he feel any genuine love for them at all? She was discharged the following day with instructions to rest at home. Thomas played the attentive husband role during the final paperwork, but she noticed how restless he was. The phone never left his hand, and he was visibly relieved once they left the hospital. He escorted her into a car, said a quick goodbye, and told her he had urgent business to handle. Before Danielle could reply, he was gone. As she sat in the back seat, the city's skyline loomed overhead like a silent witness. Danielle's suspicion hardened into resolve. She had enough. Enough of being lied to, manipulated, and kept in the dark while her life was potentially in danger. She looked down at her growing belly and felt a fierce protective instinct surge. If Thomas was entangled in illegal activities or planning something that could harm them, she needed to protect herself and her baby. But how? Thomas's power and wealth were formidable. Confronting him openly would likely end with him denying everything. She needed a strategy that would force the truth out of him, leaving no room for cunning denials. And so, the seeds of a plan began to form in her mind, a scheme that would require her to be more cunning than she ever believed possible. Returning to the penthouse felt like stepping onto a stage set for a one-woman show. Danielle paced from room to room, imagining the secrets hidden in plain sight. She pressed her fingers against the ornate wallpaper, rummaged through Thomas's study, and pulled open file cabinets in search of anything that might confirm her suspicions. As the hours wore on, she found partial evidence: bank statements with large sums transferred out of the country, cryptic emails referencing multi-party investments, and records of frequent meetings with Julia Parker in luxurious hotels. Yet, there was one chilling discovery that eclipsed all the others. Inside a locked drawer in Thomas's desk, which she pried open with a hairpin, she found a red folder labeled Project Dawn. The contents were a series of documents detailing an elaborate financial arrangement that involved buying distressed properties, inflating their value through fraudulent appraisals, and flipping them to shell companies overseas. The scale of the operation was astounding, involving millions of dollars. Julia Parker's signature appeared on multiple pages as a consultant, while Thomas's name featured as the main stakeholder. Danielle's head spun. This is beyond anything I imagined. She remembered stories of white-collar criminals who destroyed lives with paper trails. Her heart pounded, but beneath her shock lay a cold, firm determination. If these documents made it into the hands of the authorities, Thomas would almost certainly face charges. However, it wasn't just about the legality. The moral betrayal was staggering. She had married a man who might very well be orchestrating a grand-scale fraud. That night, Thomas returned home late. He moved about with caution, like a predator sensing a trap. Over a rushed dinner, Danielle finally confronted him. "Thomas, we need to talk. I'm worried about us and our baby. Are we safe? Is there something going on with your business that I should know about?" He sighed dramatically. "Danielle, I've told you 100 times. You're imagining worst-case scenarios. My deals are perfectly legitimate." He offered a half-smile, but his eyes darted sideways. "I know you worry, especially now that you're pregnant. But trust me, I'm ensuring our future is secure." A swirl of emotions coursed through Danielle: rage, betrayal, heartbreak. She bit her tongue, stopping herself from exposing what she had found. Something in her gut told her that if Thomas realized she had knowledge of his crimes, the consequences could be dire. Instead, she played the part of the docile wife, nodding and feigning relief. That night, as Thomas slept, she slipped back into his study and snapped photos of the Project Dawn files with her phone. It was risky. Her heart thudded so loudly. She was convinced it would wake him, but she had to secure evidence. She saved the images to a password-protected folder and then stashed the physical documents back in the drawer, making sure everything looked untouched. By dawn, Danielle found herself standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, staring at the city skyline. She pressed her hand against her unborn child and made a silent vow: "I will protect us from this web of lies, and I will uncover the truth, no matter what it costs me." In that moment of clarity, a plan sharpened in her mind. It wasn't just about confronting Thomas or turning him in. She needed something more foolproof, a way to ensure that when the truth came out, Thomas wouldn't slip away with a well-paid legal team or hush money. She recalled the conversation she overheard in the hospital, how Thomas had been reckless in admitting certain details. A faint idea sparked. What if she recorded his confession, gathered enough evidence to force him to face the law without any escape? Her father's old advice echoed in her mind: "Danielle, people can't wriggle free of their own words. That's how you hold them accountable." She smiled sadly at the memory, recalling a time when life was simpler and moral absolutes were easier to uphold. Now, however, she was about to step into a world of deception more complex than any dream or nightmare she had imagined. Confronting a millionaire husband with near limitless resources was no small task. Danielle realized she needed more than just stealthily snapped photos or partial recordings. She needed a scenario so controlled and dramatic that Thomas's own words would condemn him. But how to ensure he spoke freely? How to trap him into revealing enough to make him legally vulnerable? She mulled over various scenarios: secret microphones, private investigators, a well-timed ambush. Then she remembered an old story her friend Sarah once told her. A high-profile family feud ended when one spouse pretended to suffer a mental breakdown, prompting the other to let their guard down and speak openly. Inspired by this, Danielle began piecing together her grand ruse. Her performance would be threefold. First, She would stage an emotional collapse, planting doubts about her mental and emotional stability. Second, she would leverage Thomas's guilt to coerce him into a confession, ideally in a place she could control. Lastly, she would ensure the entire ordeal was documented. If she had to feign madness for him to let his secrets slip, so be it. The next morning, she made arrangements. First, she reached out to Sarah and confided in her about the deception, though she kept the specifics vague. Sarah would be her ally, someone who could vouch for her state of mind if things spiraled out of control. Next, Danielle contacted a lawyer friend from her gallery days, Julia Barnes, not to be confused with Julia Parker, who specialized in family law. Without divulging too much, she mentioned the possibility of needing legal counsel for a serious marital dispute. Barnes promised to keep her schedule flexible. To start the breakdown performance, Danielle stopped going to her prenatal yoga sessions and cancelled her usual lunch dates. She wore the same oversized sweater for days, let her hair go unwashed, and refused to leave the penthouse, claiming overwhelming anxiety. When Thomas came home, she greeted him with teary eyes and nonsensical mutterings about nightmares, and an unshakable fear that something was coming for them. She even let a few dinner plates slip from her hands, shattering on the floor actions that were partly fueled by genuine stress but amplified for effect. Thomas grew visibly concerned. No matter how distant he'd been, he wanted to maintain the facade of a supportive husband. He insisted on medical evaluations, but Danielle played the part so well, crying hysterically at the thought of doctors and medication that he backed off. Worried about the negative press if his pregnant wife was admitted to a psychiatric ward. He needed to focus on Project Dawn after all, and a major scandal would undermine his deals. "I'm just so scared, Thomas," she would sob. "I can't sleep, can't eat, I feel haunted." She would bury her face in her hands, peeking through her fingers to see his reaction. Each time, he would awkwardly pat her shoulder, offering false reassurances while never revealing the details of his clandestine activities. Yet, cracks in his facade began to show. Once, when Danielle woke screaming in the middle of the night, he snapped, "For heaven's sake, Danielle, you have to pull yourself together. I can't handle you losing it right now." His eyes flared, but he soon retreated, collecting himself. I'm sorry. It's just complicated." Yes, complicated indeed. But Danielle knew she was close to her goal. The tension in the penthouse had escalated to a near breaking point. Any day now, Thomas would slip, and she planned to capture every incriminating word. She placed mini-recording devices around the house, hidden behind potted plants, tucked into decorative vases, and even taped inside the cushions of her favorite armchair. She tested each device meticulously, replaying her own false breakdowns to ensure the audio was crystal clear. The stage was set. All she needed now was for Thomas to deliver his confession. The hardest part was waiting her nerves frayed, and the baby's steady kicks in her belly reminded her of the stakes. She had to succeed, no matter how terrifying the path ahead might be. Unbeknownst to Thomas, events outside his penthouse realm were also heating up. Whispers of real estate fraud had begun circulating in the upper echelons of Manhattan's finance world, where competitors and regulators alike smelled blood. Julia Barnes, the lawyer Danielle had confided in, discreetly kept an ear to the ground. She discovered that an investigative reporter named Michael Delacroix, known for his exposes on corporate malfeasance, had been asking questions about Thomas Sterling. If the press got hold of Danielle's evidence, the fallout could be catastrophic for both Thomas and any unsuspecting co-conspirators. Cautiously, Danielle weighed her options. If she handed over the Project Dawn files to Delacroix, the story would explode overnight. The media would swarm, and Thomas might be arrested swiftly, or worse, he might flee the country with a well-placed network of allies. Danielle didn't want him to vanish before she secured her and her baby's safety. She preferred a more controlled approach. In the background, Julia Barnes laid down a legal groundwork. She prepared potential restraining orders in case Thomas turned violent or attempted to coerce Danielle into silence. She also arranged for an off-the-record conversation with a district attorney's liaison, hinting that a major real estate fraud case could be on the horizon. If and when Danielle delivered the evidence, the DA's office would be ready to pounce. But first, Danielle needed that airtight confession. Thomas, however, was becoming a ghost. He drifted in and out of the penthouse at odd hours, sometimes not returning until the following afternoon. His phone rang incessantly with calls he wouldn't take in Danielle's presence. She recognized Julia Parker's name on the caller ID more than once. Tension coiled like a snake, threatening to strike at any moment. One evening, Danielle faked a panic attack so intense that Thomas cancelled a meeting to rush back home. She was hunched on the living room sofa, breathing erratically, tears streaming down her face. When he stepped inside, she clung to him, sobbing about nightmares of being chased by shadowy figures. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, fueled by genuine desperation to protect her child. Thomas was rattled. He sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. Danielle seized the chance. "Why won't you tell me what's really going on?" "I know something is wrong. I feel it." He exhaled sharply, his shoulders trembling. For a second, she thought he might unburden his soul. Yet the moment passed as he regained composure. "Danielle, this is just business pressure. You wouldn't understand. I promise you, everything will be fine once these deals close. You need to rest." She forced herself to nod, every fiber of her wanting to scream accusations. But she played the frightened wife instead, whispering, "Just hold me for a while." He obliged, wrapping an arm around her. Under the glare of the penthouse lights, he looked more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. The man who once seemed unshakable was crumbling, and that meant she was getting closer to the truth. Meanwhile, her hidden recording devices captured every rustle, every sigh, every half-spoken admission. Danielle sifted through hours of audio, searching for a direct statement that would tie Thomas to the fraud beyond any doubt. References to offshore accounts or shell companies were frequent but indirect. She needed him to directly confess that he was knowingly breaking the law. Time was running short. Her due date loomed, and the stress was wreaking havoc on her health. She could barely keep food down. She needed a final push, something dramatic enough to make Thomas reveal his hand. The question was how to orchestrate the perfect moment, ensuring he felt safe enough or cornered enough to confess it all. Fate intervened in the form of a sudden, sharp pain that shot through Danielle's abdomen. She was 8 months pregnant, anxiously awaiting the birth of a baby who could arrive any day now. One evening, as she prepared a simple meal, a crippling cramp buckled her knees. Alarmed, she dialed her OB-GYN and was told to rush to the hospital for monitoring. Thomas, in a rare display of paternal urgency, helped her into the car and whisked her away. At the hospital, the medical staff performed an ultrasound. Fortunately, the baby was fine, but the doctor recommended an overnight stay to observe Danielle's blood pressure and contraction patterns. Thomas stayed by her side, pacing the corridor while the machines beeped in the background. Around midnight, a nurse named Jennifer Green, a name known for her expertise in high-risk pregnancies at Mount Sinai, entered to check Danielle's vitals. She mentioned quietly that stress could exacerbate Danielle's symptoms, urging Thomas to help her remain calm. As the clock ticked closer to dawn, Danielle feigned another emotional breakdown. She clutched her stomach, sobbing about the baby's safety, her own guilt at being a terrible wife, and the suffocating fear that everything was falling apart. Thomas, already exhausted, sat on a stool near the bed, burying his face in his hands. "Why? Why do we keep suffering like this? Danielle managed between sobs. I know there's more going on than just business deals. A fresh wave of tears fell. Please, Thomas. I need you to be honest with me. Thomas rocked back, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He exhaled heavily. Danielle, I never wanted you to get dragged into this. You were supposed to have a perfect life. His voice cracked as he mumbled, I made some moves, bad ones. But it's too late to back out now. Heartbeat thundering in her ears, Danielle gently reached under her blanket, making sure the small recording device was active. She forced her voice to stay calm. Why? I can't handle living with these secrets. Tell me what you did, Thomas. If you trust me at all, just say it. Desperation shone in his eyes. Words tumbled out in halting confessions. Project Dawn. It was supposed to be a one-time thing. But Julia and I, we expanded. Flipped properties, forged documents, laundered money to pay off debts. We manipulated prices, bribed appraisers. I thought it was the only way to keep everything afloat. Danielle's pulse soared. She blinked away tears, simultaneously listening to the golden words that would seal his fate. How long? She whispered. Thomas shook his head, visibly unraveling. Years. Started even before we got married. I didn't know how to stop. We're in too deep. Julia threatened to expose me if I bailed. We'll both be ruined if this comes out. For a moment, silence blanketed the room, broken only by the steady beep of the fetal monitor. Danielle's tears flowed freely now, both from heartbreak and the knowledge that she finally had the proof she needed. She inched her hand out to squeeze his. With a trembling voice, she said, "We can still find a way out. We can make this right." She didn't specify how. The lie hung in the air like a lifeline Thomas desperately wanted to believe in. He leaned over the hospital bed, burying his face in her hair. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted this for you or the baby. I was just so greedy, so stupid." She gently pulled him in, her free hand covering the lump under her blanket where the recording device lay, capturing every last syllable. Danielle had never felt more conflicted. Her heart ached, yet a fierce sense of triumph burned in her veins. Because after that night, there would be no turning back. Thomas Sterling's confession was sealed. Danielle was discharged the next day, both relieved and burdened by her newfound power. The recording device was safely tucked away in her purse, containing all the incriminating evidence she needed. Thomas was uncharacteristically gentle as he helped her into the car, so much so that she almost wanted to believe his apologies had been genuine. But she reminded herself of the bigger picture. Thomas might feel remorse, but it was overshadowed by years of deception and criminal activity. At home, the tension between them simmered quietly. Thomas hovered around her, asking if she needed pillows adjusted or a special diet, or anything else to ease her last month of pregnancy. Danielle forced polite smiles, feigning vulnerability. Part of her longed to forgive him. She had once loved him deeply, but a harsher part knew that any compassion could blind her to the immediate danger. She had to see this through. Meanwhile, back in South Carolina, Danielle's parents, Mark and Evelyn Thompson, grew concerned. They sensed something was off each time they spoke on the phone. Danielle's voice had a tremor, and she was evasive about Thomas's role as a supportive husband. They considered flying up to New York, but Danielle convinced them she was simply overwhelmed with the pregnancy. Her friend Sarah, however, was not so easily placated. She visited the penthouse, seeing firsthand the dark circles around Danielle's eyes and the forced politeness between the couple. After Thomas excused himself to the study, Sarah demanded an explanation. Unable to hold back any longer, Danielle opened up. "I have proof, Sarah. He's involved in something huge. And I'm going to expose him." Sarah's eyes widened. She took Danielle's hand. "Are you sure that's safe? What if he—" "I know," Danielle interrupted, voice trembling. "But I can't live a lie anymore, and I won't let our baby be born into this nightmare." It has to end. Sarah nodded solemnly. I'm here for you, whatever you need. She paused, her face reflecting the fear they both felt. Just be careful. Later that evening, Danielle approached the next stage of her plan. She told Thomas she wanted to keep their marriage intact, that she was ready to stand by him, no matter what. She even suggested they talk to a counselor or a fixer who could help sort out the legal troubles quietly. He seemed surprised, but not entirely opposed. The weariness in his eyes spoke volumes. He was drained from carrying the burden of his crimes. Yet behind Danielle's reassuring words was a very different intention. She quietly reached out to Julia Barnes, providing her with the recorded audio. Barnes was both astonished and alarmed. It was even more incriminating than she expected. They decided that a legal confrontation was unavoidable. Barnes recommended they arrange a private meeting with the district attorney's liaison, possibly culminating in a sealed indictment and a carefully staged arrest to prevent Thomas from fleeing. The emotional cost weighed heavily on Danielle. Her nights were restless with nightmares of Thomas being handcuffed, of her child one day asking why their father wasn't around. But then she recalled the hospital confession, the look in his eyes as he admitted to forging documents, laundering money, and defrauding countless victims. For years, Thomas had lived a life of deceit and greed. She asked herself a question that offered a grim answer. If he's not held accountable, will he ever truly change? The day of reckoning arrived in a swirl of conflicting emotions. Danielle, barely able to stand on swollen feet, made her way to the district attorney's office. Julia Barnes was at her side, carrying a secure briefcase. Inside it lay the Project Dawn documents, originals and copies, and the digital file containing Thomas's recorded confession. They were ushered into a conference room with plain white walls, a long table, and a single pitcher of water. Two assistant DAs joined them, their solemn faces betraying the gravity of the situation. Danielle's heart thumped as she handed over the evidence. She recounted the highlights of Thomas's confession, careful to keep her composure. She explained she was terrified of retaliation, terrified that her child would be born into chaos, but also determined that justice be served. The meeting concluded with a quiet sense of finality. The DA's team assured Danielle they had enough to pursue charges of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering against Thomas Sterling, Julia Parker, and any other co-conspirators they could trace. Danielle left the building, tears streaming down her face. It felt like a betrayal of the man she once loved, yet also like a necessary act to protect herself and her baby. By the time she returned to the penthouse, Thomas was waiting in the living room, dressed casually but exuding a tense energy. He offered her a glass of water, his eyes filled with concern. "Danielle, you look pale. The doctor said you shouldn't be overexerting yourself." She managed a weak smile, heart pounding at the knowledge of what she'd just done. "I'm fine, just a little stressed about the baby." He nodded, perhaps mistaking her trembling for pregnancy nerves. As the evening wore on, he tried to engage her in small talk, baby names, nursery colors, even a possible family vacation once the child was old enough to travel. It was surreal, discussing such normal aspects of life while the sword of justice dangled overhead, ready to crash down on him at any moment. At one point, Thomas quietly admitted he felt guilty for neglecting her during her pregnancy. "I know I haven't been the best husband," he confessed, eyes cast downward. "When I look at you, I see how much love you have, and I don't know how to say I'm sorry." Danielle felt a pang in her chest, torn between empathy and anger. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby's slight kick. "It's been hard," she said, her voice quivering. "I just wish we could have been honest with each other." Thomas swallowed hard. For a moment, it looked as though he might break down completely, but he steadied himself. "We'll figure it out," he murmured. That night, Danielle slept in the guest room, claiming it offered more comfort for her aching back. In reality, she needed space to grapple with the emotional avalanche of what she had set in motion. She wept into her pillow, reliving memories of their whirlwind romance, the lavish wedding, the moments when he would cradle her in his arms and promise the world. All those promises, she thought bitterly, were built on a mountain of lies. Sometime around midnight, she heard him shuffling outside the door, murmuring her name. She feigned sleep. She couldn't face him just yet. Tomorrow or the next day, the DA's office would move. An arrest warrant might arrive at dawn, or perhaps at a time carefully chosen to catch Thomas off guard. Danielle found no comfort in revenge. She felt only a hollow ache for the dreams that had died and the uncertain future that stretched before her. The moment came in the quiet of a Tuesday afternoon. Danielle was resting on the living room couch, her feet propped up on cushions. Thomas was on his phone, pacing near the window. Then came a firm knock at the door. Alarmed, he turned to Danielle, who shrugged weakly. She watched, her pulse racing, as he opened it to find two plainclothes detectives and a uniformed officer. "Thomas Sterling?" one detective inquired, holding out a folded paper. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering." Time seemed to slow. Thomas's face went pale. His phone slipped from his hand, landing with a clatter on the polished floor. He tried to stammer out words, denial or confusion, but the detective stepped forward methodically. They turned him around, snapping cuffs around his wrists. Danielle sat up, feeling faint, tears spilling down her cheeks. She didn't move, couldn't move. She watched as the man she married was led away, the front door closing behind them with a hollow thud. The penthouse was silent, except for her ragged breathing. She felt both a crushing sense of loss and a swell of relief. The facade was over. In the days that followed, the media erupted with the scandal. News outlets plastered Thomas Sterling's face across front pages, alongside speculation about the extent of the fraud. Julia Parker, too, was arrested attempting to board a flight to Europe. The DA's office confirmed that the case was built on irrefutable evidence, including audio recordings of Thomas himself describing the illegal scheme. But amid the public spectacle, Danielle had her own private battle to fight. The stress took a toll on her health, and one evening she was rushed to the hospital in early labor. Sarah was at her side, holding her hand as she endured contractions. Danielle's parents arrived, panic etched across their faces. Over 19 hours, her body fought through every wave of pain and anxiety until, finally, she gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Gabriel, drawing from her favorite painting by a Renaissance master, depicting the angel Gabriel's annunciation of hope. Holding him in her arms for the first time, she realized this was why she had to do everything she did. He was a fresh start, an embodiment of innocence in a world marred by deceit. Meanwhile, Thomas remained in custody, denied bail because of flight risks. His legal team scrambled, but the evidence was overwhelming. The Project Dawn files, corroborated by Danielle's recordings and testimonies from appraisers who turned state's evidence, formed a case that prosecutors deemed ironclad. A court date was set to determine the final charges and sentencing. Some nights, Danielle lay awake, Gabriel sleeping peacefully in a hospital bassinet beside her, wondering if she had truly done the right thing. She had loved Thomas once, part of her always would. But each time she recalled his hospital confession, she knew that love without honesty was a brittle foundation. She had to break it apart to rebuild a better life for herself and her child. The swirl of public drama gradually receded. The tabloids moved on to new scandals, but the legal process churned on, slow and methodical. Danielle resolved to testify when the time came, ready to face Thomas across the courtroom. She would tell her truth, not out of vengeance, but to finally set herself free from the illusions that had bound her. Weeks turned into months. By the time Danielle walked into the courthouse, her arms cradling baby Gabriel, she felt an unexpected calm. Dressed in a simple black dress, she took her place in the witness stand, meeting Thomas's gaze for a fleeting second. There was sorrow in his eyes, perhaps regret. She couldn't be certain if he understood the magnitude of his wrongs, or if he simply mourned the downfall of his empire. Either way, it no longer mattered. She spoke clearly and unwaveringly, describing the night of his confession and the lengths he had gone to cover his crimes. In the end, the jury's verdict was swift, guilty on multiple counts. The judge's sentence would ensure Thomas's absence from Danielle's life for a long time. As the gavel pounded, Danielle closed her eyes, hugging Gabriel close to her chest. She thought of sunflower fields in Charleston, of Dr. Robert Jenkins's lessons about honesty, of all the tiny betrayals that had led her to this moment. Through it all, she found the strength to stand tall. This was not the fairy tale ending she once imagined. Yet, in a quiet, resolute way, it was a triumph. She had chosen truth and safeguarded her child. The cost was high, but so was the reward, a shot at a life free from hidden debts and half-truths. And that, Danielle realized, was the best happily ever after she could hope for.
Have you ever wondered how one scandalous leak could destroy an entire empire overnight? Picture this. A stunning millionaire, revered as a philanthropic tycoon, and his radiant pregnant wife, seemingly the perfect power couple. But beneath the glossy photographs and luxurious charity galas, dark secrets simmer. When an explosive video surfaces online, revealing her husband's steamy affair, the pregnant wife doesn't crumble in silence. Instead, she steps into the blinding lights of a press conference, shocking the world and obliterating his career in a single heartbeat. Get ready for a tale of betrayal, resilience, and a downfall so swift it will leave you breathless. Ava Carmichael first met Oliver Carmichael at a fundraiser for the Wilson Children's Hospital in Chicago. Oliver was the guest of honor, a self-made millionaire who had gained national fame after selling his tech startup to Google for a fortune rumored to be in the hundreds of millions. Ava, then a junior event planner, was charged with ensuring the evening ran smoothly. From the moment she locked eyes with him across the packed ballroom, her world shifted. He approached her with a gentle smile and an outstretched hand. Polite conversation turned into an exchange of dreams and life goals. The chemistry between them was electric. Oliver, charming yet aloof, was drawn to Ava's warm-hearted nature and pragmatic approach to life. Their whirlwind romance made headlines in society pages when Oliver took Ava to a private island in the Caribbean. Photos of them strolling barefoot on a secluded beach landed in People magazine, and whispers of an engagement soon surfaced in tabloids. By the time he proposed under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights in front of 1,000 roses, Ava was head over heels. The wedding was a grand affair at the historic Drake Hotel, with the CEO of Morgan Stanley among the guests, and a performance by a famous R&B singer that Oliver secretly flew in. Their union was hailed as a modern fairy tale, the philanthropic tech millionaire and the compassionate event planner uniting their energies to make the world a better place. But in every fairy tale lurks a moment of darkness, and for Ava and Oliver, it was just around the corner. A year after their lavish wedding, Ava discovered she was pregnant. The news filled the Carmichael mansion with excitement. Oliver appeared overjoyed. He'd often spoken of wanting a large family, and Ava was ecstatic to finally be starting that journey with him. They announced the pregnancy during a red carpet charity gala benefiting children with rare diseases. Ava wore a flowing emerald green gown that discreetly showed off a blossoming baby bump. When she and Oliver stepped onto the stage, the entire crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment Oliver placed a tender hand on Ava's stomach. Soon after, local outlets like the Chicago Tribune covered the Carmichael baby buzz, praising Oliver for his ongoing philanthropic endeavors. A short feature on NBC's Today Show hinted that the Carmichaels might become America's new it couple. Ava was flattered, albeit slightly overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Behind the scenes, however, something was off. Oliver had become more distant, engrossed in late-night phone calls and cryptic text messages. When Ava asked about them, he brushed her concerns aside with practiced ease. "It's just business, sweetheart." She tried to believe him. After all, she knew the burden of running a multi-million-dollar conglomerate was enormous. But as her belly grew, so did her suspicions. Faint clues, the lingering trace of unfamiliar perfume on his collar. A second phone he never let her see gnawed at her peace of mind. Still, Ava reassured herself that any man under immense pressure could behave evasively. She clung to hope that once their baby arrived, Oliver would slow down and refocus on their family. Little did she know the cracks forming in their marriage were about to split wide open. With each passing week of her pregnancy, Ava noticed that Oliver's schedule became more erratic. Some nights he would rush through dinner offering half-hearted compliments about her cooking and then dash off to emergency meetings. Other times he'd claim to be traveling for business expansions, leaving Ava alone in their expansive mansion, the echo of her own footsteps, a constant reminder of her isolation. What truly unsettled Ava was the subtle shift in Oliver's demeanor. He was no longer the attentive husband who'd once tracked down her favorite bakery an hour away to bring her freshly baked croissants. Instead, he seemed perpetually preoccupied, scrolling his phone under the dinner table, offering only partial attention to Ava's excited updates about the baby's kicks. In an attempt to distract herself from mounting worries, Ava threw herself into philanthropic work. She organized a fundraiser for hurricane relief, collaborating with real-life crisis manager and PR expert Liz White, a name well known in Chicago's elite circles for orchestrating big fundraising galas. Liz noticed Ava's tense smile and asked if everything was okay at home. Ava merely shrugged it off with a practiced grin. Little did Ava know Liz would soon become more than just a professional acquaintance. Liz's skill in handling scandals and public image crises would be invaluable when the Carmichael family's private pain exploded onto the public stage. For now, Ava remained clueless about the danger simmering beneath the surface. She believed the biggest concern she faced was coaxing Oliver to show up on time for doctor's appointments, but in the hush of her mind, a quiet fear took root. If Oliver was pushing her away, who or what was he pulling closer? Ava never considered herself a snoop. She valued privacy and believed that trust was the bedrock of any strong relationship. But as uncertainty haunted her nights, she found herself unable to resist the urge to peek into Oliver's world. One evening, when Oliver announced yet another urgent meeting and sped off in his car, Ava was left in the large, empty mansion, feeling the baby stir inside her. The sense of foreboding was unbearable. She walked into his home office, a spacious, modern study lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Her eyes landed on his desktop computer, which glowed with a faint screensaver. With trembling hands, she jiggled the mouse. To her surprise, no password prompt appeared. The desktop opened immediately to an email account. A pang of guilt clutched her, but desperation drove her to click. Most messages were innocuous business correspondences, but a name caught her eye. Miranda Devereaux, a high-profile interior designer from New York. Ava recalled Oliver mentioning Miranda once, someone he was hiring for a new condo project. She clicked on the email thread and found an exchange of flirtatious notes, culminating in a few short video clips. Heart pounding. Ava hesitated before opening them. The first clip showed Oliver at a hotel bar, with Miranda leaning in intimately. The second clip was longer security camera footage from the hotel corridor. It showed Oliver and Miranda entering a suite together late at night, arms wrapped around each other. A wave of nausea overwhelmed Ava, nearly overshadowing the usual pregnancy queasiness. Without a second thought, she pressed forward and sent the emails and clips to herself. She had seen enough, and her world would never be the same again. Oliver returned well past midnight, reeking of expensive cologne. The moment he stepped inside, Ava's tears were already running down her cheeks. She waited for him in the living room. The lights dimmed to a cold glow. Her hands gripped her phone, the forwarded videos ready to play at any second. Ava, he called, visibly startled by her tear-streaked face. "What's wrong?" She didn't bother with niceties. Heart pounding, she pressed play on her phone, letting the damning footage speak for itself. The room filled with the muffled sounds of Oliver's laughter in that hotel corridor, Miranda's figure clinging to his arm. Oliver's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his usually controlled features. He reached for the phone. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, voice tight. Ava yanked it away, raw hurt radiating in her gaze. "So it's true," she breathed. "You've been cheating on me. With her." At first, Oliver tried to deny it. Words like misunderstanding and business acquaintance tumbled from his mouth. But the evidence was incontrovertible. Finally, he sank onto the sofa, running a hand through his hair. It was just once he muttered, eyes downcast. "A mistake. You have to believe me." Ava's indignation flared. "A mistake. You've been emailing her for months, from what I can see." "Don't lie to me, Oliver. Not now." He bowed his head, too ashamed or too trapped to continue. Furious tears streamed down Ava's face, and she felt the baby kick within her, a cruel reminder of the life she carried, the future she was trying to protect. In that instant, the fairy tale they'd built shattered into pieces, leaving Ava with only heartbreak and betrayal. Ava spent the night in the guest bedroom, barely sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, the images of Oliver with Miranda replayed like a cruel nightmare. By dawn, she felt hollowed out, yet beneath the grief grew a potent anger she had never experienced before. Before Oliver left for work the next day, she confronted him in the kitchen. She was still in her pajamas, hair disheveled, a world away from the poised socialite she'd become known as in Chicago's charity circuit. "End it," Ava demanded, voice quivering with anger. "Break it off with Miranda for good, and tell the press you're stepping down from the Devereaux project, and you'll be going to marriage counseling with me." Oliver looked at her for a long moment. He seemed more fatigued than she had ever seen him. "I'll end it, Ava," he promised, exhaling sharply. "I don't want to lose our family." The words should have comforted her, but they didn't. The betrayal ran too deep. "I'm pregnant with your child, Oliver. Do you even understand what this stress is doing to me, to our baby?" His silence spoke louder than any defense he could muster. He offered a half-hearted nod before leaving. Ava watched him go, unsure if she had just saved their marriage or delayed its collapse. Though she demanded a swift end to his infidelity, a haunting question nagged at her. Could trust ever be fully repaired once it was broken? Little did she know the storm was only beginning, and a single promise from Oliver would do little to protect them from the catastrophe that awaited. Unable to bear the suffocating loneliness of the mansion, Ava sought solace with her closest friend, Delilah Pierce. They met at a cozy neighborhood cafe, where Delilah arrived with open arms and a wave of concern evident in her eyes. In hushed tones, Ava recounted the entire saga from the suspicious late nights to the damning hotel footage. Delilah listened occasionally, clutching Ava's hand, her coffee growing cold. "I always had a bad feeling about Oliver's constant business trips," she admitted, a note of regret in her voice. "I'm sorry I never brought it up." Ava found some measure of comfort in Delilah's empathy. "I feel so stupid," she said, tears threatening to spill once more. "How could I not see it sooner?" Delilah gave Ava's hand a firm squeeze. "Don't blame yourself. Oliver's the one who made this choice. You're carrying his child. You deserved better." Over the next hour, Delilah offered unwavering support, suggesting therapy resources, and even offering to help Ava prepare for any potential legal issues. "You have to protect yourself, especially with the baby on the way. I know a great lawyer, Samantha Holden, who handled my cousin's messy divorce, just in case." Though the mention of a lawyer made Ava's stomach churn, she recognized the importance of covering all her bases. As they parted ways, Delilah vowed to stand by her side through the ordeal, no matter how ugly it got. Walking back to her car, Ava felt slightly less isolated, but the protective bubble of friendship could only do so much. She would have to face the storm head-on, whether Oliver kept his promise or not. A few days later, the hush of early morning was shattered by Ava's phone, buzzing relentlessly on the bedside table. She groggily picked it up to see dozens of messages and missed calls. Her heart pounded. Could something have happened to Oliver? But as she opened social media, dread coiled in her stomach. A gossip account with thousands of followers had posted a scandalous blind item about a tech mogul with a pregnant wife caught in an affair with a New York socialite. The post included grainy stills from the very hotel footage Ava had discovered, though faces were blurred. Her phone exploded with notifications, friends, acquaintances, even random strangers wanting details. Overwhelmed, Ava felt the baby move as though sensing the turmoil. She quickly turned off her phone, tears stinging her eyes. In a panic, she rushed downstairs to find Oliver. He was in his office phone, pressed to his ear, shouting into the receiver. She overheard him say, "I don't care what it costs, just kill the story," before slamming the phone down. Their gazes locked. Ava's heart sank at the desperation etched across his features. "Someone leaked it?" she asked, voice trembling. He nodded grimly. "Yes, but we can't be certain who. It might be someone from the hotel staff or someone else." He shot her a look, as if suspecting she had shared the video. Ava bristled, stepping back. "Do you really think I'd do that? You promised to end this, Oliver. Now look what's happening." Guilt flashed across his face, replaced almost instantly by defensiveness. "We need to put out a statement denying everything. My entire career could be on the line." Ava swallowed hard. She wasn't ready for the media circus, but it was already knocking at their door. Their once private nightmare was about to go very, very public. Oliver scrambled to manage the crisis, summoning his high-profile PR team, led by the formidable Kate Winthrop, a specialist in damage control for celebrity and corporate scandals. Within hours, she arrived at the Carmichael mansion, with a flurry of assistants' laptops and a meticulously organized crisis management plan. "We're dealing with an unverified leak," Kate said briskly. "We have two primary strategies: deny or deflect. If we deny, you risk fueling the rumor mill. If we deflect, we might direct attention elsewhere, but it has to be believable." Oliver paced the room, raking a hand through his hair. What about claiming these images are doctored? That this is just an attempt to undermine my philanthropic work? Kate's expression remained neutral. We can try that, but the pictures look too authentic. And if more footage surfaces, we'll be caught lying. Ava observed the meeting from a corner, her mind swirling. She felt like a spectator at the unveiling of her own heartbreak, reduced to a mere prop in Oliver's PR strategy. As talk of hush money and NDAs swirled, she felt the baby kick a stark reminder that this crisis was not just about reputations, but the future of her family. Eventually, Oliver turned to her. Ava, I need you to stand by my side. We have to present a united front. His words were a bitter pill. She recalled his promise to end the affair. Yet here they were, strategizing about half-truths and misdirection. Ava thought of the unborn child, of the intense scrutiny they would soon face. With shaky resolve, she nodded. She hated the idea of lying to the public, but she also couldn't bear the thought of the scandal smashing their life to bits. She had no idea that the worst was still to come. Even as Oliver's PR team prepared an official statement labeling the footage misleading and maliciously edited, a new crisis brewed behind the scenes. Miranda Devereaux. The woman at the center of the scandal refused to quietly fade away. Instead, she began making demands of her own. One evening, Oliver returned home from an emergency meeting with Miranda's lawyers. Ava watched his strained face as he poured himself a stiff drink. She's threatening to release a full statement, he muttered. Claims she's got text messages, voice memos, everything. She wants compensation, or she'll go public. Ava felt an icy dread settle in her stomach. If Miranda released more evidence, the shallow denials being fed to the media would crumble instantly. So what are you going to do? She asked, voice tight. Oliver's silence was telling. He tossed back his drink before answering. We're negotiating. She wants a huge sum, plus some endorsement deals for her design business. It's extortion, basically. The thought of Oliver paying off Miranda made Ava's skin crawl. And you're seriously considering it. He ran a hand over his face. If it means saving my reputation, yes. You don't understand what's at stake. Our philanthropic work, my investments, people rely on me. If I go down, a lot of people will be hurt. For a split second, Ava wondered if Miranda was truly the villain here. After all, she hadn't vowed to be faithful. Oliver had. The line between right and wrong blurred beneath the weight of scandal, greed, and betrayal. In that moment, Ava realized that Oliver's talk of saving his reputation might overshadow his concern for their marriage or the innocent child they were bringing into a world of lies. Waking up to relentless texts and calls from acquaintances, Ava found her anxiety hitting new heights. Even visits to her OB/GYN became fraught with tension as she feared being recognized and judged. Everywhere she went, it felt like eyes were on her analyzing the scandal. Social media was ablaze with speculation. A few brave tabloids even claimed to have exclusive new evidence pending release. The constant swirl of rumors left Ava hollow and exhausted. Did half of Chicago already assume Oliver was cheating? Did they pity her, or worse, mock her for staying alone in her bedroom? Ava scrolled through her phone, scanning social media. She came across a tweet from Anderson Cooper, a real-life figure known for calling out hypocrisy on his CNN segments, commenting generally about the moral failings of the wealthy and powerful. Although it didn't mention Oliver by name, the timing was suspiciously pointed. She felt a spike of anxiety. Ava found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. How many times had Oliver lied? Was he truly remorseful or just scrambling to hide his tracks? And what if Miranda wasn't the only affair? The seeds of doubt took root, thriving in the soil of shattered trust. One thing became undeniable. If this story escalated further, Oliver's polished facade would collapse. The philanthropic golden boy would be exposed as a fraud, and Ava would be caught in the crossfire. For the sake of her baby, she had to find a way to protect herself, even if it meant going against the man she had once adored. Just as Kate Winthrop and her crisis team finalized a hopefully worded statement for Oliver to deliver, the bomb dropped. Late one evening, a popular YouTube channel called City Secrets Unmasked posted the unedited high-definition version of the hotel footage. This time, the camera angle was clear as day. Oliver's face was unmistakable, laughing, leaning in, whispering to Miranda, before disappearing into a room. Within minutes, the video was trending. National outlets picked it up, and Twitter erupted with the hashtag Carmichael Scandal. Oliver's name soared to the top of search engines, overshadowing even major political news. Ava watched the chaos unfold from the living room television, the baby's weight pressing on her ribs as if in response to her stress. She felt an overwhelming desire to flee to escape the relentless spotlight. But this was her life. There was nowhere to hide from the digital mob. Within hours, the Carmichael mansion was besieged by paparazzi. Some had the audacity to shout questions about her pregnancy, insinuating that the unborn child might not even be Oliver's. Ava gasped at the cruelty. The speculation stung like an open wound. Oliver was unreachable, holed up in his corporate office downtown, bombarded by phone calls from investors and lawyers. Alone. Ava cradled her belly, tears silently rolling down her face. The humiliation was staggering. She wondered, had Oliver realized in his pursuit of forbidden thrills that the collateral damage would be so immense as the scandal spread beyond the local Chicago scene? Ava knew one thing for sure: there was no more denying or deflecting. The world had just gotten a front-row seat to their marital nightmare. Desperate to hear Oliver's side of the story, and furious at his vanishing act, Ava summoned her strength and drove to the headquarters of Carmichael Innovations, located in a sleek, glass-paneled tower in the heart of downtown Chicago. Security guards recognized her instantly and allowed her up, though they exchanged anxious glances. Inside Oliver's office, she found him in a tense meeting with his board of directors. They huddled around a massive mahogany table, glowering at him as if he were a pariah. The room fell silent when Ava walked in, her visibly pregnant figure, a jarring reminder of the personal turmoil overshadowing their corporate meltdown. "Gentlemen," Oliver began, attempting composure. "This is my wife, Ava." She faced them chin high, despite the dread curling in her stomach. "Could I speak to my husband alone?" she asked softly, though her eyes burned with determination. Most of the board members exited without protest, some casting disapproving looks at Oliver. Once they were gone, Ava unleashed the questions that had kept her awake at night. "You said you'd end things, but the world has proof that you didn't. How could you lie to me again?" Oliver rubbed his temples, eyes bloodshot from stress. Miranda was supposed to keep it quiet. She swore she wouldn't let it get this far. "I tried to fix it, Ava, I really did." His words only stoked her fury. "All you did was attempt to bury the truth with money," she said, voice trembling. "You've destroyed our marriage, our child's future, everything." They stared at each other across the empty boardroom. For the first time, Oliver's confident mask cracked, revealing a man trapped by his own misdeeds. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked, voice hollow. Ava couldn't answer. She was no longer sure there was anything left he could do to make this right. In the ensuing days, the corporate fallout grew dire. Prominent investors in Carmichael Innovations withdrew support, worried about the scandal's impact on share prices. Philanthropic partners quietly severed ties, not wishing to be associated with an affair so brazenly exposed. Oliver spent most nights at the office attempting to salvage deals. The mansion felt more like a tomb than a home. Paparazzi still lurked outside the gates, waiting for a glimpse of the troubled couple. Ava found herself pacing the halls, mind whirling with uncertainty. A scheduled charity event for the Wilson Children's Hospital. A cause close to both Oliver and Ava dropped Oliver from the speaker lineup. This move spoke volumes. If even the hospital Oliver once championed was distancing itself, he was rapidly running out of allies. Realizing that her own philanthropic work was now at risk of being overshadowed by scandal. Ava called Liz White, the crisis manager she had worked with months ago. Over coffee in a secluded part of the city, Ava poured out her worries about the baby, the paparazzi, and the unrelenting media scrutiny. Liz listened sympathetically. "You need to start thinking about your own image, Ava, not just Oliver's. Because right now everyone sees you as the victim. But if this keeps spiraling, they might start seeing you as complicit or naive." Ava swallowed hard. She didn't want a war with Oliver, but it was becoming clear she needed to protect herself and her unborn child. She left that meeting with Liz, knowing she had to make some hard decisions, and soon. By now, the Carmichael scandal was headline news across major networks. CNN's Anderson Cooper, having previously hinted at the moral failings of the powerful, dedicated a segment specifically to Oliver's downfall, inviting legal and ethical experts to weigh in. The public response was brutal. Many saw Oliver as the epitome of hypocritical arrogance, preaching philanthropy, while betraying his pregnant wife behind closed doors. At the mansion, Ava tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She kept her prenatal appointments, attempted to rest, and even started decorating the nursery in a soft palette of yellows and greys. Yet every trip out was a gauntlet of flashing cameras and shouted questions. She began dreading the very thought of leaving home. One particular morning, the tension became unbearable. Oliver returned from another fruitless series of investor meetings, shoulders slumped. When he saw Ava packing a suitcase in the master bedroom, a flash of panic ignited in his eyes. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice trembling. "I'm going to stay with Delilah for a while," she replied, zipping the suitcase shut. "I need space. This environment isn't healthy for me or the baby." Oliver opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Instead, he deflated like a punctured balloon, slumping against the doorway. "Ava, please," he finally managed. "I'm losing everything." "I can't lose you too." She looked at him, sadness washing over her. "I wish you'd thought of that before, Miranda. I need time to figure out if there's anything left worth saving." His eyes brimmed with tears, but he said nothing more. Ava dragged her suitcase down the grand staircase, stepping out into the barrage of paparazzi alone, her heart heavy with betrayal and sorrow. It was during Ava's stay at Delilah's cozy brownstone that she received a phone call from a blocked number. Although she usually avoided unknown calls, something compelled her to answer. A soft voice introduced itself. "This is Miranda Devereaux. Please don't hang up." Shock rendered Ava momentarily mute. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Why would Miranda call her directly? She contemplated ending the call, but couldn't resist her curiosity. "What do you want?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Miranda sighed on the other end. "Believe it or not, I never intended for this mess to go public." Someone else got hold of the security footage. I can't say more without jeopardizing my safety, but I wanted you to know it wasn't me who leaked it. Ava's throat tightened. That doesn't change what happened or how you and Oliver... She paused, tears threatening. You ruined my marriage, my life. A moment of silence passed. I understand you hate me, Miranda said quietly. But I'm calling because there's something else you should know. Oliver has been hiding more than just our affair. He's in deep trouble legally and financially. I'm sure you've noticed the deals collapsing around him. It's not just because of the scandal, there's a federal probe into his finances. Tax evasion, money laundering, I'm not certain. But it's serious. A swirl of nausea hit Ava. The idea that Oliver's downfall was bigger than an affair blindsided her. How do you know this? She finally managed. Miranda hesitated. Let's just say I overheard some conversations. Be careful, Ava. If the feds get involved, they won't hesitate to come after anyone close to Oliver, even you. Before Ava could respond, the line clicked off. She stared at her phone, heart racing with a new dread. Oliver's betrayal might pale in comparison to a looming legal catastrophe, and she was now unwittingly entangled in it. Miranda's warning weighed heavily on Ava's mind. She remembered Delilah's earlier recommendation to consult a lawyer. After days of sleepless nights, she mustered the courage to do just that. Through Delilah's referral, she met Samantha Holden, a skilled divorce attorney, known for her tenacity in high-profile cases. They met in Samantha's sleek downtown office, shielded from prying paparazzi. Sitting across from the polished oak desk, Ava felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as she recounted Oliver's affair and Miranda's foreboding message about the feds. Samantha took thorough notes, her brow furrowed. This is bigger than just infidelity, Ava. If Oliver is facing a federal investigation for financial crimes, you need to protect your interests. If marital funds are implicated, the government could freeze assets. The words froze Ava's blood. I don't know the first thing about these allegations. I'm pregnant. I just want my baby to be safe. Samantha offered a sympathetic smile. I understand. My advice is to quietly file for legal separation. That way you create a clear line between your finances and Oliver's. If he's in legal jeopardy, it may protect you and your child from any fallout. And if things get worse, we can move forward with a full divorce. Though the idea of legally distancing herself from Oliver filled Ava with sadness. She knew it might be her only chance at safeguarding her child's future. With trembling hands, she signed an engagement letter, officially hiring Samantha as her attorney. As she left the office, a flurry of mixed emotions assailed her: grief for the marriage she once cherished, anger at Oliver's deceptions, and a glimmer of relief that she was finally taking control of her own fate. In the aftermath of the leaked video, Oliver's reputation took a nosedive. Investors fled in droves, stock prices for Carmichael Innovations tumbled, and philanthropic projects froze. The media was relentless. And yet the public had not heard directly from Ava beyond a few brief sightings and no-comment statements. The tabloids, sniffing blood, began speculating wildly. Was Ava quietly arranging a divorce settlement? Had Oliver threatened her into silence? Some articles even suggested that her pregnancy was a fabricated ruse to garner sympathy. When Liz White, the crisis manager, called to check on Ava, she proposed a bold solution. Ava, you need to tell your side of the story in your own words. Let the world see you're not just a silent, suffering wife. Ava hesitated. Standing in front of a microphone, addressing a horde of reporters while pregnant, no less, sounded terrifying. But Liz's argument made sense. The rumor mill was devouring her in absentia, and with Oliver refusing to come clean about his affair or financial dealings, it might be time to cut ties publicly. "I'll do it," Ava finally said, surprising even herself with her resolve. "But I'm not lying or covering for Oliver anymore. I'll tell the truth just enough to protect myself and my baby." Liz agreed, her voice brimming with encouragement. "Leave the logistics to me. I'll arrange a controlled press conference, minimal chaos. But be ready. Once you open that door, there's no going back." Ava closed her eyes, feeling the baby move. She understood the gravity of her choice. This wasn't just about clearing her name, it was about reclaiming her identity and ensuring her child wouldn't be born into a vortex of secrets. In the days leading up to the press conference, Ava resided in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She prepared statements with Liz White, conferred with Samantha Holden, and braced herself for the inevitable media frenzy. All the while she heard almost nothing from Oliver. Then on the eve of her scheduled press appearance, she received a late-night phone call. It was Oliver, his voice shaking with desperation. "Ava, please don't do this. Don't go public. It'll ruin any chance I have left to fix things." She steadied herself, fighting back tears. "You've had every opportunity to fix this, Oliver. You chose not to. This press conference isn't about vengeance. It's about protecting myself and our baby." The silence on the other end was palpable. Finally, he spoke, voice hollow. "I understand you're angry. But you have no idea the legal mess I'm in. A public spectacle will just invite scrutiny. It could land me behind bars." A hollow laugh escaped Ava's lips. "That's not my fault. You did this to yourself." Oliver's next words chilled her. "If you ruin me, you ruin the future of this family. Think about that before you step in front of those cameras." She hung up, breathing heavily, as if she'd just run a marathon. For a moment, doubt tugged at her. She still cared for the father of her child, even after all his betrayals. But the time for illusions was over. Ava swallowed the lump in her throat and reminded herself why she was doing this, to clear her name, to safeguard her baby's future. Oliver had made his bed. Tomorrow, the world would finally hear her side. Morning dawned on Chicago gray clouds gathering in the sky, as if foretelling the tumultuous day ahead. Despite the swirling anxiety in her chest, Ava felt an unexpected sense of calm. She'd chosen a simple but elegant maternity dress in a soft ivory shade, the color symbolizing a fresh start in her mind. Liz White and Samantha Holden met her at the small conference venue, an airy minimalist space rented for the occasion. They'd intentionally avoided the grandiosity of a hotel ballroom, hoping to keep the focus on Ava's message rather than ostentatious surroundings. Security guards milled about outside, ensuring the event remained somewhat contained. Inside, journalists from major outlets like CNN, the Chicago Tribune, and local TV stations fidgeted with microphones. Cameras were poised, ready to broadcast every second. The hush in the room was electric. Ava's heart drummed like thunder in her ears. She kept a hand on her belly, drawing strength from the life growing within. As Liz guided her onto the small stage, Ava spotted a handful of supportive faces in the front row. Delilah Samantha, and even a hospital representative from Wilson Children's Hospital who had come to show solidarity. Taking a steadying breath, Ava stepped behind the podium. Flashbulbs sparked, and a wave of murmurs filled the room. The tension was thick like a coiled spring on the verge of releasing. It was time to speak her truth, not just about the affair, but about the flawed man behind the philanthropic facade, and the toll his secrets had taken on her life. The calm before the storm was over. Ava Carmichael was about to face the world head-on. The conference room fell silent as Ava approached the microphone. For a moment, she simply stood there, letting the bright camera lights and hushed anticipation wash over her. "Good morning," she began, voice trembling slightly. "I'm Ava Carmichael. I'm here to address the rumors and speculation regarding my marriage to Oliver Carmichael." Eyes from every corner of the room locked onto her. Journalists leaned forward, pens poised. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion. Ava's heart pounded like a drum, but she pressed on. She spoke of her pregnancy, how she had longed to start a family in a loving, stable home. She confessed that Oliver's affair was both devastating and humiliating, that she had discovered undeniable proof of his betrayal. She explained that while she once considered standing by him, his continued deception and the possibility of deeper legal entanglements made it impossible for her to remain silent. At one point, a wave of emotion gripped her. Ava paused, tears threatening to cloud her vision. She glanced at Delilah, who offered a reassuring nod. Summoning her courage, Ava continued. "I'm not here for revenge," she clarified, voice growing steadier. "I'm here to protect my child and to separate myself from the lies that have come to light. Any future decisions, including legal ones, will be made with the well-being of my baby in mind." When she finished, the room erupted in questions. Liz stepped in, reminding reporters to keep their inquiries respectful and that Ava's attorney would handle anything pertaining to potential lawsuits. Ava exhaled, her body trembling with relief and nerves. She had done it. She'd laid bare her pain, her intentions, her truth. At that moment, she had no idea how drastically this single press conference would alter the course of Oliver's life and hers. Ava's press conference ricocheted through the media like a lightning strike. Clipped segments ran on national news networks. The full recording went viral on YouTube. Social media platforms erupted with support, condemnation, and endless debate. Hashtags like "Stand with Ava" and "Carmichael Collapse" trended simultaneously. Public perception of Oliver flipped almost overnight. People who once admired him for his charitable work now saw him as a manipulative hypocrite. The sincerity in Ava's statement made it clear she was not seeking revenge, but merely staking her claim to dignity and security for her unborn child. A day after the press conference, CNN's Anderson Cooper weighed in again, praising Ava for her courage and condemning the toxic culture that allowed powerful men to evade accountability. The Chicago Tribune published an op-ed titled "The Strength of Ava Carmichael, Lauding Her Poise Under Pressure." Corporate repercussions were swift. A major investment round that Oliver had been courting fell apart. The few remaining partners in Carmichael Innovations distanced themselves, hastily removing Oliver's name from promotional materials and websites. Even philanthropic boards started voting him out to preserve their reputations. Ava watched the news unfold from Delilah's living room. It felt surreal to witness the magnitude of the fallout she had unleashed by simply speaking her truth. A twinge of guilt gnawed at her. Oliver's downfall was monumental, and part of her still cared about the father of her child. But she couldn't deny the satisfaction of finally freeing herself from complicity in his deception. Little did she realize the next blow in this unraveling saga would come not from tabloid headlines, but from a place with the power to permanently reshape Oliver's destiny, and by extension her own. Just when the media firestorm seemed at its peak, another bombshell dropped. The U.S. Attorney's Office announced a federal investigation into Carmichael Innovations. News broke that Oliver Carmichael was being indicted on charges of tax evasion, wire fraud, and securities fraud. The timing mere days after Ava's press conference sent shockwaves through financial circles. Cameras swarmed outside the federal courthouse as Oliver was spotted arriving with his legal team, forced to enter a plea in front of a judge. The humiliating spectacle was broadcast live, capturing every grimace and tense exchange. The very networks that once celebrated Oliver's philanthropic feats now tracked his every misstep. Ava learned of the indictment through a news alert on her phone. Her stomach churned. She sat on Delilah's couch phone in hand and watched the live coverage. Oliver looked haggard shadows under his eyes, the weight of impending consequences etched into his every movement. The charges carried severe penalties, if convicted. Oliver faced the possibility of a long prison sentence. This was beyond mere scandal. It was a life-altering reckoning. Yet the indictments also served as a shield for Ava. With formal charges laid against Oliver, Samantha Holden moved swiftly to bolster Ava's separation case, ensuring none of the allegedly laundered funds were connected to Ava or her unborn child. As the news cameras pivoted from sensational gossip to grave legal analysis, Ava felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Relief that she was extricating herself from Oliver's web of lies, sorrow for the father of her child, and a haunting worry about what kind of future lay ahead for her baby, one with a father potentially behind bars. The day after Oliver's court appearance, Ava woke to a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." "Oh." She stared at the message for several minutes, waves of sadness rolling through her. His apology was too little too late, like a whisper in a roaring storm. But it was better than silence. Over the next week, Oliver's attempts to contact her became more frequent. Voicemails and texts appeared daily. Ava listened to some tears gathering in her eyes as Oliver's usually confident voice cracked with desperation. He begged for forgiveness, confessed he had been reckless, and claimed to still love her. Yet Ava couldn't forget the nights he'd lied to her face. She couldn't erase the memory of that leaked video or the swirl of scorn she'd endured from the public, and she certainly couldn't ignore the federal charges. Samantha advised her not to respond, at least until the separation process and potential custody arrangements were established. But deep inside, Ava grappled with conflicting emotions. She remembered the Oliver who once left her handwritten love notes every morning, the Oliver who built a children's library wing at the local hospital. Could that man still exist? Or had he always been an illusion? In quiet moments, she would place a hand on her growing belly heart, aching for the child who might never know a father outside prison walls. For all Oliver's sins, Ava couldn't deny that she wished he had chosen a different path, one that might have let them remain a family. Despite the turmoil, Ava discovered she wasn't alone. In the wake of her public statement, letters of support flooded in from women who had faced similar betrayals. Some messages came from single mothers who offered encouragement and practical tips on raising a child independently. The outpouring moved Ava to tears. It gave her a renewed sense of resolve. Philanthropic circles that had once rolled out the red carpet for Oliver now embraced Ava instead. Organizers at the Wilson Children's Hospital invited her to speak at an upcoming fundraiser, praising her authenticity and resilience. Representatives from various women's advocacy groups reached out inviting her to collaborate on initiatives that assisted pregnant women in crisis. Ava felt a flicker of hope. Though her marriage was crumbling, she could funnel her pain into a new purpose, advocating for women caught in relationships eroded by power imbalances and betrayals. Delilah even suggested they start a foundation to provide legal and emotional support to pregnant women facing domestic or financial struggles. Yet with each invitation came the inevitable question, what's next for Oliver's wife? The irony wasn't lost on Ava. She was no longer Oliver's wife in any practical sense, but the world still tied her identity to his. She resolved to carve out her own name and mission separate from his tarnished legacy. In her quieter moments, though, when the well-wishers and supporters had gone home, she still faced the emptiness left by Oliver's absence. Even with the world rallying around her some nights, she felt more alone than ever. A few weeks into Oliver's legal battles, Ava received a call from his attorney. He wanted to arrange a private meeting. No press, no cameras, just Oliver and Ava in a neutral location. The request startled her. A part of her had begun to imagine a future with no direct contact at all. Despite Samantha's caution, Ava agreed, feeling the child shift in her womb, like a gentle reminder that Oliver was still the father. They chose a small law firm's conference room downtown, one with tinted windows that blocked any paparazzi from capturing the encounter. Oliver arrived first. Dressed in a tailored suit, he looked paler, thinner, and burdened by a stress that had etched lines into his face. When Ava entered, they locked eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension was so thick she could barely breathe. Finally, he broke the silence. "I know I've lost your trust, and maybe I'll never regain it. But I wanted to see you to ask about the baby." His voice was hushed, almost reverent. Ava swallowed, placing a protective hand on her belly. "The baby's fine, healthy," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm due in a few months." Oliver exhaled a shaky breath, a mixture of relief and sorrow. "I made an unforgivable mistake. And now I'm paying for it in ways I never imagined. But if there's any chance at all, I want to be there when our child is born." A swirl of conflicting emotions welled in Ava. She wanted to protect herself, to keep him at arm's length. Yet she couldn't deny the child's need to know its father, assuming he wasn't behind bars. I can't promise anything right now," she replied cautiously. Oliver nodded, understanding that words wouldn't erase the hurt he'd caused. The meeting ended quietly with more questions than answers. As Ava left, she wondered if there was any glimmer of reconciliation, or if it was simply too late for that. Time moved forward, even if Ava felt stuck in emotional quicksand. Weeks turned into months, and her pregnancy edged into its final trimester. Her belly swelled, making everyday tasks more cumbersome, but also filling her with a fierce, protective love for the child growing inside. Oliver's legal battles took center stage in national media. Each court date brought fresh revelations of financial misconduct, fraudulent tax filings, shady shell companies, and possible insider trading. Courtroom sketches of Oliver flooded the news, capturing his anxious eyes and trembling posture. Still, he occasionally sent Ava messages, updates on his case lamentations about losing major assets, even an ultrasound-themed baby blanket he had purchased before the scandal blew up. Ava read and received these gestures with guarded compassion. She was no longer naive enough to believe they fixed anything, but she could see the desperation in his attempts. Meanwhile, Ava's philanthropic work blossomed. She collaborated with Liz White to hold a charity drive for underprivileged pregnant women, collecting baby supplies, prenatal vitamins, and funds for maternal care. The event drew significant media coverage, with many praising Ava for turning personal tragedy into positive impact. Through it all, she grappled with her upcoming childbirth, uncertain whether Oliver would or should be there. The clock was ticking toward a new life entering the world, and she had yet to reconcile the role Oliver would play. As each day passed, the question burned brighter. Could a man so consumed by lies and greed ever become a loving father? Ava's labor came unexpectedly one evening well before her due date. She had been at Delilah's brownstone finalizing details for another charitable event when a sharp pain sliced through her. Gasping, she doubled over, her heart pounding in sudden alarm. Delilah rushed her to the nearest hospital, the swirl of city lights casting an eerie glow against the anxious hush of the car ride. By the time they arrived, Ava's contractions had intensified, leaving her breathless and trembling. Nurses whisked her into a maternity suite, hooking her up to monitors. Panicked Delilah contacted Samantha Holden, who in turn thought to call Oliver's attorney. Within an hour, Oliver appeared at the hospital, looking frantic and disheveled. The medical staff recognized his face from the scandalous headlines, but remained professional. Ava, though startled to see him, was too overwhelmed by pun to protest. Time blurred in a dizzying swirl of contractions, medical jargon, and shouted encouragement. Ava was gripped by a primal blend of fear and determination, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. Oliver hovered by her side, tentatively offering a hand. In her pain, she grasped it instinctively. Hours later, after what felt like an eternity, Ava heard the baby's first cry. Relief and awe collided in her chest. The nurse carefully placed a tiny, wriggling infant in Ava's arms. She sobbed, pressing kisses to the baby's delicate forehead. Through tear-blurred vision, she saw Oliver standing nearby, eyes shining with raw emotion. In that instant, their entire scandalous past receded, eclipsed by the fragile miracle of new life. Yet the question lingered. Would this fleeting moment of unity carve a lasting path forward for them? Or would the shadows of betrayal and legal peril snuff it out? Back at the hospital, Ava watched as Oliver gently rocked Amelia, his face softened with awe. For a moment, he looked like the man she once loved before Leeson scandal. He whispered stories to Amelia, promising to change to be present. Ava remained guarded. "This doesn't undo everything," she said quietly. "I know," Oliver replied, eyes on their daughter, "but I want to earn your trust back for her." Later, as discharge papers were signed, Oliver asked if he could come home with them. Ava paused, then shook her head. "Not yet. Amelia and I need time." He nodded visibly, crushed but respectful. "Thank you for letting me be here." As she cradled Amelia and stepped into the waiting car, Ava felt both the weight of the past and the hope of a future. Trust was fragile, but for her daughter's sake, she was willing to leave the door cracked just enough. In the weeks after Amelia's birth, Ava embraced motherhood in quiet refuge, away from media glare. Oliver, facing trial, visited often gentle with Amelia, sincere in his efforts. Ava remained cautious, but let him in a little at a time. Then came his sentencing. Found guilty of tax evasion and securities fraud, Oliver received 5 years in federal prison. Outside the courthouse, tears slipped down his face as he told Ava, "I'll serve my time. I hope there's still a chance for Amelia, and maybe for us." Ava, holding Amelia close, replied softly, "We'll see. One day at a time." As Oliver was led away, Ava stood beneath the Chicago sky, her daughter nestled in her arms. The fairy tale had crumbled, but something more honest remained a second chance. Not for romance, but for truth, for healing, and for a life finally free of secrets. She was ready to build that future, one step at a time. Ava Carmichael's life changed the moment the leaked footage of her husband's affair hit the internet. But it was the power of her own voice at that pivotal press conference that truly redefined her destiny. While Oliver's empire crumbled under the weight of his transgressions and legal battles, Ava emerged stronger, driven by her love for her newborn daughter and a determination to carve out a future rooted in truth. Ultimately, hers is a story of resilience, triumphing over betrayal of motherhood, guiding the path to self-discovery. Ava transformed from a silent figure overshadowed by her husband's fortune into a public advocate for women facing emotional, financial, and marital turmoil. Though Oliver's journey led him to a prison cell, Ava found the courage to stand on her own, proving that even the darkest revelations can pave the way for newfound purpose. If you found meaning or inspiration in Ava's journey, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support empowers us to uncover more stories that shine a light on the power of truth and resilience. Together, let's continue inspiring and uplifting one another, one extraordinary tale at a time.